Throwaway account. I'm 29M. My girlfriend is 28F. Together a little over 3 years. From the outside, our relationship looked intense in a good way. Passionate. Close. You two are inseparable, people used to say. I took that as a compliment. At the beginning, her jealousy felt flattering. She wanted to know where I was, who I was with, what time I'd be home. If a female coworker texted me about work, she'd joke, "She seems a little interested." I laughed it off. I told myself it meant she cared, that she was invested. Slowly, the jokes stopped being jokes. She'd get quiet if I mentioned going out without her. She'd ask follow-up questions that felt casual but weren't. Who's going? Why didn't you invite me? Are there girls there? If I hesitated, even to think, her mood would change. Not angry, disappointed. Like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. She started framing it as boundaries. Said she just needed reassurance because she'd been hurt before. I didn't want to be the guy who dismissed someone's trauma, so I adjusted. I shared more, texted more, checked in constantly. It felt like compromise at first. The moment that stuck with me happened when she said, "I trust you. I just don't trust other people around you." I nodded. I didn't realize yet that trust with conditions isn't trust at all, and that caring can slowly turn into control without ever raising its voice. Once I'd accepted her jealousy as something I needed to manage, the rules started changing. Quietly, incrementally. Nothing dramatic enough to protest, but enough to shape my choices. She'd say things like, "I just feel safer when I know what's going on," or, "It's not that I don't trust you, I just need transparency." Those words sounded reasonable, loving, even, but transparency started to mean permission. If I told her I was meeting friends after work, she'd ask for updates. Not directly, just little check-ins. "How's it going? Still there? Who ended up coming?" If I didn't reply fast enough, she'd send a simple that somehow carried weight. When I got home, she'd be quiet, withdrawn, like she was waiting for an apology I didn't know how to give. I stopped staying out late. Then I stopped making spontaneous plans. It was easier to avoid the tension than to explain myself every time. I told myself this was just what commitment looked like. Consideration, compromise, prioritizing your partner. The twist was how she framed my compliance as proof of love. She'd smile and say, "See, when you care, it's not hard." That stuck with me. It taught me that discomfort was a sign I wasn't trying hard enough. One night, I canceled plans with friends because she sounded off on the phone. She thanked me, kissed my cheek, and said, "I just feel so chosen right now." I remember feeling proud. I didn't realize I just learned the most dangerous lesson of all, that choosing her meant choosing myself less. The shift from reassurance to obligation was so subtle I only recognized it in hindsight. At some point, checking in stopped being something I did to make her feel better and became something I did to keep things calm. If I forgot, there were consequences, not yelling, not accusations, just emotional withdrawal, silence, short answers, a heaviness that filled the room until I addressed it. She started asking for proof in small ways, photos when I was out, screenshots of group chats as a joke. She'd laugh and say, "I just like seeing what you're up to," but her eyes stayed fixed on my reaction, not the screen. If I hesitated, even briefly, she'd say, "Why is that weird for you?" That question messed with my head. It implied that my discomfort was a problem, not the request. The twist came when she started predicting my behavior. She'd say things like, "You're probably going to forget to text me," or "I know you'll get distracted and ignore me." When I inevitably fell short, because no one can be perfectly available all the time, she'd sigh and say, "I knew it." It felt like failing an exam designed for me to fail. I noticed I was planning my day around avoiding her disappointment. I'd check my phone before doing anything else. I'd feel a spike of anxiety if it died while I was out. Once, when it did, I panicked. Not because I needed it, but because I knew what waiting for me at home would feel like. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. Not because she was angry, but because I was afraid of making her feel anything at all. I didn't plan the conversation. It came out sideways, the way things do when you've been holding them in too long. We were on the couch, scrolling separately, and she asked casually why I hadn't texted her for almost an hour earlier that day. I said I was busy. She said, "Busy doing what?" Something in me finally snapped. I told her it felt like I was constantly being monitored. I tried to keep my voice calm, even gentle. I said I loved her, but I needed more trust. The room went very quiet. Then she laughed. Not cruelly, softly, like I just said something naive. She told me I was being dramatic, that everyone checks in, that if I had nothing to hide, this wouldn't bother me. She said, "It's weird that this makes you uncomfortable." That was the twist. The conversation flipped so fast, I barely caught it happening. I wasn't talking about her behavior anymore. I was defending my character. She asked why I was suddenly so defensive, if something had changed, if someone had changed me. I ended up reassuring her. Again, promising I'd do better. Again, afterward. She curled up next to me and said, "Thank you for understanding. I just get scared of losing you." I remember staring at the wall, feeling hollow, because I tried, really tried to set a boundary, and somehow had turned into proof that I was a problem. That night, I realized something uncomfortable. Every attempt to create space made her pull tighter, and the more I gave in to keep the peace, the less room there was left for me. After that night, she was sweeter than ever. That's what confused me the most. More affection, more compliments, little notes, surprise hugs, random, "I love you" texts in the middle of the day. Anyone else would have called it a healthy rebound after a tough conversation. It didn't feel healthy to me. It felt conditional. The sweetness only showed up when I behaved the right way, when I checked in on time, when I chose staying home over seeing friends, when I handed over my phone without hesitation if she jokingly asked, "Let me see." If I did all that, she was warm, playful, loving. If I didn't, even slightly, the mood shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to make me uneasy. The twist came when she started reframing my compliance as growth. She'd say things like, "You've really changed lately," or "I feel so much more secure now." Those words felt like praise, but they also felt like a warning. Secure because I'd made myself smaller, because I'd learned the rules. I caught myself lying to friends, saying I was busy when I wasn't, canceling plans preemptively so I wouldn't have to explain them later. One night, a friend joked, "Man, you've disappeared." I laughed, but my chest tightened. The scariest part wasn't that she was controlling me. It was that I was starting to control myself for her. I realized I wasn't choosing what made me happy anymore. I was choosing what would keep her calm. And the longer I did that, the harder it became to tell the difference between love and fear. That's when I started asking myself a question I'd avoided for months. If this is what caring looks like, why do I feel so trapped? The realization didn't come during a fight. It came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was at work, phone on silent in my pocket, focused on a task that actually mattered. When I checked my phone an hour later, there were 6 missed messages from her. Not panicked, not angry, just stacked. "Hey, are you busy? Did you see my text? Everything okay? Hello?" My stomach dropped, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I knew exactly what was waiting for me when I replied late. I texted back, apologized automatically, explained myself. She responded with a single line, "I just worry when you disappear." That word, disappear, stuck with me. I hadn't gone anywhere. I hadn't ignored her. I just existed outside her awareness for an hour. That night, she was quiet. Not upset, she said, just a little hurt. She told me it made her feel unimportant when I didn't respond right away. I listened, nodded, reassured her. And as I did, something inside me finally clicked. I wasn't in trouble for what I'd done. I was in trouble for not being constantly available. The leash wasn't obvious. There were no rules written down, but it was there, tightening whenever I moved too far in any direction that wasn't centered on her. Lying in bed later, I felt a wave of sadness, not anger. Sadness for how normal this had become, for how quickly I'd learned to measure my worth by how quickly I replied. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I didn't. The next day, I did something that would have felt unthinkable a month earlier. I left my phone on my desk during a meeting and didn't check it for 2 hours. Not to punish her, not to make a point, just to see what would happen if I didn't manage her anxiety for once. When I finally looked, there were 9 messages. The tone had shifted halfway through. Concern turned into frustration. Frustration edged toward accusation. By the last one, she'd written, "This feels intentional." That word, intentional, hit hard, as if not being instantly available was an act against her, not a normal human behavior. I replied calmly, said I'd been in meetings, that I was fine. Her response came fast. "You could have told me." That night, I tried again to talk about it. I said I needed some breathing room, that I didn't want to feel like I was constantly on call. She listened, nodded, then said, "I just don't understand why that's so hard for you." The way she said it made it clear she didn't actually want to understand. Here was the twist. She wasn't asking for reassurance anymore. She was asking for compliance. She framed my boundary as rejection, as distance, as proof I was pulling away. And the more I tried to explain, the more it felt like the explanation itself was the problem. After she went to bed, I stayed up thinking about how many times I confused intensity with intimacy, how jealousy had masqueraded as love, how "I just worry" had become a justification for control. For the first time, I didn't wonder how to make her feel safe. I wondered how to make myself free. Once I stopped trying to manage her reactions, everything became clearer. Not easier, just clearer. I didn't announce anything. I didn't threaten to leave. I simply stopped preemptively reassuring her. I answered messages when I could. I made plans without over-explaining. I acted like a normal person instead of a handler. She noticed immediately. Her questions became sharper. "Why are you acting different? Are you mad at me? Did I do something?" I told her the truth, that I was tired of feeling anxious all the time. She said she was tired too. Tired of feeling like she cared more. Tired of being the only one invested. That was the twist. In her mind, investment meant access. It meant constant updates, constant availability, constant emotional presence. Anything less felt like abandonment. When I didn't fill in the gaps, she filled them herself with suspicion. She started checking my social media more, asking about people who liked my posts, wondering out loud why certain coworkers showed up in my stories. When I didn't immediately defend myself, she accused me of being secretive. Silence, apparently, was guilt. Watching this unfold without jumping in to fix it was painful, but it was also revealing. Her anxiety didn't decrease when I reassured her. It adapted. It always needed more. More proof, more closeness, more control. One night, after another round of questions, she said quietly, "I don't recognize you anymore." I almost said the same thing back. But instead, I realized something important. The person she didn't recognize was a version of me that wasn't orbiting her fear. And once I saw that, I knew this wasn't about jealousy. It was about power. The word power stayed with me longer than I expected. Once it entered my head, everything rearranged itself around it. Her questions weren't curiosity anymore. They were checks. Her concern wasn't care. It was monitoring. Love had started to feel less like warmth and more like being watched. The breaking point came on a Friday night. I told her I was grabbing a drink with co-workers after work. I didn't over-explain. I didn't apologize. I just stated it. She smiled and said, "Okay, have fun." I almost believed it. 20 minutes later, the text started. "What bar? Who's there? Send a pic." I didn't respond right away. When I finally did, she replied, "It's weird that you're ignoring me when you're out." Ignoring. Again. Like my attention belonged to her by default. When I got home, she was sitting on the couch in the dark. She said she'd been anxious all night, that she'd barely eaten, that my silence made her imagine things. And then she said the sentence that changed everything. "If you loved me, you wouldn't do this to me." That was a twist. My autonomy had become cruelty. My independence had become harm. I realized then how impossible the standard was. Any attempt to live my own life could be framed as betrayal. I didn't argue. I didn't reassure. I just listened. And as she talked, I felt something settle into place. This wasn't love asking for closeness. It was fear demanding control. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider the question I'd been avoiding. What if staying meant slowly disappearing? The next conversation didn't happen because I planned it. It happened because I finally ran out of explanations. We were in the kitchen, doing nothing important, when she asked why I'd been so distant lately. The way she said it made it clear she already had a theory and was waiting for me to confirm it. Normally, I would have reassured her, told her nothing was wrong, promised to do better. This time, I didn't. I said I felt controlled. The word landed heavy between us. She stared at me like I'd insulted her. Then she laughed just a little and said, "That's a strong word." She told me she wasn't controlling. She was anxious, that her feelings mattered, that if I cared, I'd be more understanding. Somehow, within seconds, the conversation turned into me justifying why I deserved basic space. That was a twist. She didn't deny the behavior. She denied my right to label it. She asked why I was suddenly so independent, if I was trying to push her away, if there was someone else. The accusations came fast, one after another, like she was scrambling to regain footing. I felt oddly calm listening to them, like I was watching a pattern play out instead of being trapped inside it. I told her I needed boundaries, real ones, time without checking in, plans without permission. Her face changed, not angry, not sad, afraid. That's when I understood something clearly. My boundaries weren't a threat to the relationship. They were a threat to the control she'd mistaken for love. The moment I said the word boundaries, the tone in the room shifted, not slowly, instantly. It was like I'd tripped a silent alarm. She stopped listening and started reacting. She said boundaries were for people who didn't trust each other. That needing space meant I was already halfway out the door. That healthy couples don't keep score or draw lines. I told her I wasn't leaving. I just needed room to breathe. She shook her head and said, "You're changing," not as an observation, as an accusation. She said she missed how close we used to be, how available I used to be, how I didn't overthink everything. The closeness she was describing suddenly sounded a lot like compliance. Here was a twist. She framed my boundaries as abandonment. She said she felt unsafe now, that my distance triggered her anxiety, that asking less of me felt impossible. And suddenly, I was back in a familiar position, being asked to manage her emotions so she wouldn't fall apart. The difference this time was that I could see it happening in real time. When I didn't back down, she got quiet. Not reflective quiet, calculating quiet. She asked if this meant we needed to reconsider things. The implication hung in the air, comply or lose me. For a moment, fear flared. I didn't want to lose her. I didn't want to be the bad guy. But underneath that fear was something steadier than panic. I realized that any relationship where asking for space threatens its survival isn't built on love. It's built on control. And for the first time, I didn't try to soften that truth to make it easier to swallow. After that conversation, things went eerily quiet. Not peaceful, careful. She stopped questioning me outright and started watching instead. Watching when I picked up my phone. Watching how quickly I replied. Watching whether I mentioned plans before making them. It felt like she was gathering data, recalibrating. The twist was how polite she became. She thanked me for small things, asked instead of demanded, told me she was trying really hard. On the surface, it looked like progress. Underneath, it felt like restraint, like someone holding their breath, waiting to see if pressure alone would pull me back into line. One evening, she cooked dinner and talked about our future, vacations we'd take, places we'd move. It sounded hopeful, but it also felt strangely transactional, as if these visions were being offered in exchange for my compliance. When I didn't respond with the enthusiasm she expected, she went quiet again. That's when it hit me. Calm was no longer comforting. It was a warning. I realized how much of our relationship depended on me managing her fear. When I stopped doing that work, the structure wobbled. Her anxiety didn't disappear. It just went underground. And I knew from experience that it would resurface, stronger, the moment I stepped out of line. Lying awake that night, I admitted something I'd been avoiding. I wasn't afraid of losing her anymore. I was afraid of staying and slowly shrinking until there was nothing left of me. And once that fear replaced the old one, I knew the direction this was heading, whether I was ready for it or not. The next shift came quietly, like most of the important ones had. I told her I was going to see friends after work. Not asked, told. No long explanation, no reassurance wrapped around it. Just a statement. My heart was racing when I said it, which told me how far things had already gone. She paused and smiled too quickly and said, "Okay." I knew that smile. It wasn't acceptance. It was storage. She was putting the reaction away for later. While I was out, my phone stayed in my pocket. I laughed. I talked. For the first time in a long while, I felt like myself again. When I checked my phone later, there were messages, but fewer than I expected. That scared me more than if there had been dozens. When I got home, she was calm. Too calm. She asked how it was. I said good. She nodded, then said, "I guess this is just how things are now." There was no accusation in her voice, just disappointment shaped like resignation. It was meant to make me feel guilty for choosing myself. Here was the twist. It didn't work. Instead of rushing to reassure her, I realized how much power that guilt used to have over me and how weak it felt now. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't being cruel. I was just living without asking for permission. That night, I understood something clearly. Love that requires constant proof isn't love. It's probation. And once you stop reporting in, the system either adapts or collapses. I had a feeling. I knew which one was coming. It didn't take long for the collapse to show itself. 2 days after that night, she stopped pretending everything was fine. The patience evaporated. The politeness cracked. It was like watching someone drop an act they were tired of maintaining. She accused me of being selfish. Said I was acting single while still in a relationship. Asked why I suddenly needed so much freedom. If I really loved her. The words came fast, sharper than they had in weeks. I realized then that the calm had never been peace. It had been pressure waiting to be released. The twist came when she said, "You know, I wouldn't have to be like this if you were more reassuring." There it was, the quiet admission. Her behavior wasn't something she wanted to change. It was something she expected me to manage. My boundaries weren't just inconvenient. They were a threat to the system that kept her comfortable. For the first time, I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't offend myself. I just listened. And the more she talked, the clearer it became that nothing I said would ever be enough unless it gave her control back. She ended the conversation by saying, "I feel like I'm losing you." I thought, no, you're losing control over me. That night, I lay in bed replaying every moment I called this love. Every time I confused intensity with intimacy. And I finally accepted a truth that hurt but also felt clean. You can't build a healthy relationship with someone who needs you small to feel safe. The decision didn't feel dramatic. There was no final explosion, no ultimatum thrown across the room. It felt quiet and heavy, like setting something down after carrying it for too long. I told her I couldn't do this anymore. Not the jealousy, not the monitoring, not the constant need to prove myself. I said it calmly, which seemed to hurt more than anger ever could. She cried, said she was just scared, said she loved me too much, said everyone else would have left sooner. That last part almost made me laugh. Almost, because it revealed the truth she didn't realize she was admitting. She knew this wasn't healthy. She just thought love meant enduring it. Packing my things felt surreal. Each item reminded me of a version of myself that had slowly learned to ask permission to exist. When I walked out, she asked if I'd regret it. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I didn't need to justify choosing freedom. The strangest part came weeks later when the anxiety faded. I stopped checking my phone compulsively. I made plans without fear. I realized how quiet my mind had become. Here's what I learned. Jealousy isn't proof of love. Control doesn't equal care. And if someone needs constant access to you to feel secure, what they want isn't closeness. It's ownership. If you're reading this and something feels familiar, trust that feeling. Love shouldn't feel like surveillance. And you shouldn't have to disappear to keep someone else comfortable. Walking away didn't mean I loved her less. It meant I finally loved myself enough.